Short story by Paul McCann, The Doomsday Train. Collectors Freeway, as it was known, was the only toll-free highway from the city to the airport. It had 3 lanes on each side with a grass strip that divided the traffic in each direction. Quite often along the grass strip, people would have to throw things out, get rid of bits of furniture, other unwanted items they didn't want anymore, and that's how it got the name Collectors Freeway. It was a lonely sunrise that saw Deezer make her way to the airport along Collectors Freeway. She was catching a plane to attend her mother's funeral interstate, and said a little prayer as she drove along the highway. "Oh Lord, forgive me for the times that I didn't get along with my mother too good. I never spoke to Mum. I never told her I love her. But I always will." Right at that moment, the car engine misfired, and it came to a rest on the side of the road. She opened up the bonnet of the car and looked at the hoses and the engine. And she looked up at the sky. And she said, "Well, I know I'm not going to make it to Mum's funeral. Ah, Lord, let her know that my heart was there and I wanted to be there." Deezer stood on the highway beside her broken down car. It wasn't long when a motorist slowed down and pulled in to help. She was so relieved when she saw that driver get out of his car, approached her. He smiled and he said, "Having a little bit of difficulty then? Let me have a look." He proceeded to check the engine. In a cruel twist of fate, he turned and snatched the handbag from the seat of Deezer's car and rushed back into his car and sped off on the freeway, abandoning Deezer there. Deezer had now lost her mobile phone, her purse, along with her bank cards and all her ID. Angry and anxious, she got back into the car and locked all the doors. She looked out the windscreen. Time passed slowly. And then the dark cloak of night rolled in. She faced the fact that now she wasn't going to get to her mother's funeral, and she didn't like the thought of having to spend the night sleeping in her car on the side of the road. She turned on the hazard lights of her car, said another prayer. "Lord, I could use a little help here. Send me someone to help." Suddenly, the car started to shake a little, and she realized when her hands started to burn and she started to sweat that she was having another seizure. Deezer had lived with this condition for many years. She let the seizure happen, and then she started to lie back into the seat and closed her eyes. At that very moment, a driver of a car travelling along the highway saw the hazard lights flashing and decided to stop and check out what was going on. He pulled over in front of Deezer's car and went over to investigate. The young man immediately saw that the person inside was in need of help. He could see that she was having a seizure and immediately tried to get into the car. However, the car was locked, all of the doors. So he went to his car and took a large wrench and smashed the glass of the passenger door in Deezer's car, and then he removed her from the front car seat. He placed a pillow under her head and lay her flat on the side of the road. A couple of minutes later, Deeza's seizure was over, and she opened up her eyes. And the young man said, "Hey, don't be afraid. My name's Dan. You know what? Sometimes I've got seizures too, so I knew how to help." Deezer smiled and replied, You, you, you don't know how grateful I am. I have no idea who you are or why you stopped, but thank you, Dan. My name is Denise, but everyone calls me Deezer." An icy chill suddenly came over them both. It felt as if death itself had kissed him on the cheek. And "Can you feel that, Deezer?" Dan asked. "Sure do," she said. A weird presence fell around them, and something was in the air. A foreboding came over them. They heard the sound of heavy metal wheels screeching and grinding to a stop. And the ground opened up and they saw a huge train with smoke and flames billowing from the funnels. And the train whistle blew loudly. It sounded like a cavalcade of cats crying together in the night. From a loudspeaker on the roof of the train, a ghastly voice echoed, "It's my way or the highway." Deezer was terrified and started to scream in fright. Dan held her hand and said, "What the hell's happening here? Please, trust me, Dan said as he placed his arms around Deezer, who was screaming, "Help me, please, I'm so frightened." They both looked out the car windscreen as the train came to a rest right across the highway. Some of the passengers got off the train. They were strange, ghostly figures. A moaning and a groaning. Some of them carried weapons, chains, iron pipes, even sickles and pikes and sabres. All the traffic on the highway came to a stop in a hurry, and there were multiple pile-ups everywhere. Some cars and buses ran off the road, and trucks jackknifed and piled up and burst into flames. Deezer and Dan sat together, watching as people crawled out of the twisted wreckage and carnage. Dan and Deezer looked at each other, watching as winged demons descended from the sky. And something smelt horrible, and something felt terribly, terribly wrong. Something was going on, something that the world had never seen before. Dan looked at Deezer. "Do you believe in God, Deezer?" "I do," she answered right away. "Oh God. Well, I think that really, right now, we really need your help." And Deezer started to pray. Through a loudspeaker, the driver of the train spoke again with an even harsher and soul-piercing voice. "It is the last hour and doomsday is here. All of you are as good as dead. There is nowhere to run. Your lives are over and done. It's time to board the hell-bound train." The ground rumbled and cracks opened up all over the highway. Dark creatures crawled out of the crevices in the ground as smoke spewed out from the empty holes where their eyes used to be. And an army of fearsome dark forces emerged from nowhere, carrying ropes and chains. Deezer looked at Dan and said, "Jesus, Dan, what are we going to do?" He replied, "Are you still praying, Deezer?" She responded, "Like never before." "Me too." "Well then, come on, let's go, Deezer. Follow me." "Deezer, run like hell." Dan jumped out of the car with Deezer right behind. They jumped a small fence near the exit lane on the highway and ran as if they had rockets on their feet. Further along they saw an old church on a hill with a neon cross glowing brightly up on the roof. Dan and Deezer climbed up on the roof. They could still see the train on the highway, and they could still hear the evil, awful voice on the loudspeaker of the train screaming and calling out, "There is no escape from your fate. It's my way or the highway. Demons of the sky, round up the passengers. Monsters of the underworld, tie them and get them on board." The first person who was dragged from the wreckage of the car was the body of that well-dressed gentleman who had robbed Deezer of her purse. Deezer felt okay about that. The businessman screamed and seemed barely alive as his feet and hands were tied. Then he was thrown into one of the carriages on the train. The evil demons began screaming and jumping as they were running about and grabbing people from the buses and cars. They were dragged and gagged and then bagged up and tied before being thrown into the carriages of hell-bound train. Dan reached out and took Deezer by the hand and he said, "Pray like you've never prayed before, Deezer." "Gather your angels, Lord. Hell has come and the battle has begun." Dan joined in and prayed as well. Their voices were one in the night. "Good Lord Jesus, save us from the fires of hell and cast that train back where it came from." In that moment, angels came down from the sky and took up the fight. And as a voice thundered from the sky above, "It's my way or the highway. And we're all bound for kingdom come. Awaken holy souls and let there be light." Thunderbolts fell from the sky, and one by one the dark forces were overcome. The train departed back into the ground, and the people of the earth were saved. And everyone around the world had got to hear about the Doomsday Train. Deezer and Dan had sat all night and waited till the sun rose on a new day. And that's when the TV cameras came. They descended on the place from all over the world, and journalists with cameras to interview all of the people who had been through that nightmare on the highway. Busloads of tourists arrived, and when the world waited for a sign and looked for an answer to what had happened, Dan and Deezer didn't need any sign, didn't need any proof of what had happened. They were convinced what they had seen, and they had decided there and then that they would go on a crusade with a message for everyone about the saving power of God. It was a story of heaven's mighty warriors who overcame the demons of this world and the underworld. And the story that Dan and Deezer told was spread all over the world, wherever they went. Everyone who heard believed every word. Dan and Deezer lived a very long life together and never had another seizure as long as they both lived. The end.